Hello, and welcome to our success story series hosted by GoLean6Sigma.com. My name is Elizabeth Swan, and I'm a managing partner and executive advisor at GoLean6Sigma.com. And we're very excited to have this offering for our audience because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we highlight someone who has completed an actual project and have applied Lean Six Sigma inside their organization. And we get to share those stories with you. And today we're highlighting a project success story from Cod Child Development. This is a nonprofit based on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And for those of you unfamiliar with Cape Cod, they are right next to the islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, where Cod Child Development also does work. So that's part of their area. Their mission is to provide world-class child and family-focused programs that nurture each child's full potential. And their vision is taking care of Cape Cod's children and their families. So really wonderful mission, and great to be able to present this series on nonprofits. Today's presenter is Amanda Booth, and she is the Director of Development and Communications here at Cod Child Development. And let me tell you a little bit about Amanda. Amanda is just a month shy of 30. You're so young, Amanda. This newlywed is a Cape Cod native, and she's worked for Cod Child Development for 15 months. So pretty new. Being the quirky extrovert that she is, she found a passion for development and communications back when she interned for a nonprofit in her undergrad at Bridgewater State University. She also loves that she goes to her job every day with the purpose of helping others, which is really nice. And after finishing her master's at Suffolk University, she worked in marketing for a nonprofit in Boston, and she was recruited for a small nonprofit in Chatham, that's also on Cape Cod, very nearby. The nonprofit sector was exciting for Amanda because she never knew who she was going to meet or what to expect. And she loves being on her toes. Don't you, Amanda? She then settled in Harwich. She bought a home with her now husband, and knowing the importance of networking, she met her now CEO at an event almost 3 years ago. And after numerous conversations and meetings, she decided Cape Cod Child Development was where she wanted to be. A few fun facts. Amanda is a yoga practitioner, a coffee connoisseur, and yet she's always going to enjoy a nice glass of champagne. You're well-rounded. You're well-rounded, Amanda. She's also a wanderlust, and she's traveled all over the world. She's skydived 5 times, is that right? And ziplined in the jungles of Costa Rica. Now that's an accomplishment. That's an accomplishment. That got you ready for doing Lean Six Sigma, didn't it?
Oh, yes, all day.
Well, let's get into your project, Amanda. Let's hear what you did.
Okay, so thank you so much for that introduction, Liz. And just to give you a little bit of a backstory. So first I'll tell you the title of my project. And so it's to increase the number of grants ready from 1 day out to 1 week out. When I started at Cod Child Development, there was a lot of turnover in the senior management, and there wasn't really a process put in place. And so a lot of the time, people are really busy, and I'll get into all of that later in this project, but people just really didn't have the time to get things in on time. And it was very stressful for me because these grants equal dollars for our organization. And as some of you may or may not know, that nonprofits are run a lot through grant funding. So it's huge, huge importance, not only to my position, but the nonprofit overall. So like I said, grants were completed 90% of the time, sometimes almost 100% of the time within 24 hours of that. And the goal is to increase the number of grants ready from 1 day out to 1 week out by July 2017. That actually continued into today. It's still a work in progress.
So let me just clarify, when you say from 1 day out to 1 week out, people were giving you things the day before you had to get them back and submitted, and you were looking for them to give you more like a week before you had to submit it. So you were scrambling at that last second.
Absolutely. And just in case anybody's not familiar with the grant process, you get something 24 hours before. You have to edit it. You have to, there's guidelines for each grant. You might have to make copies or mail it out or bring it in by a certain time. And so there's a lot of, I manage the grant process. So there's a lot in the last, 24 hours aside from editing that you need to get done in order to complete the grant on time.
So it really impacts the quality of the grant and the odds of getting approved.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this is a big deal, especially in the case of working for a nonprofit.
absolutely. And so the takeaway from the voice of the customer translation matrix is I'm the customer in the process and I need to do some grants submitted with more lead time. And so I tried to figure out a way to make that happen. And so one of the first things that we did was a swim lane map, and a swim lane map kind of maps out all of the different processes from the second that you got that email or that letter in that there's a grant that's ready and available for nonprofits to when you actually physically mail it in, whatever the grant holders want you to do. And so mapping it out made it clear on how many steps are involved in the process from end to end and how many people it takes to complete the process. It's not just one person involved in it. It's, in my case, could be 5 to 7 people. And so just mapping it out, just like I said, is just a clear way to get from A to Z in the grant process.
And you found out there was a lot more steps in there that you had actually considered.
Absolutely. And different communication styles, which I'll touch upon again later in the slides. So, okay, so the first thing I will do is a run chart, and it's the baseline of days prior to the due date that the grants are submitted. So what I had done is looked at 4 different grants back in, so our project started in about February 2017. So I looked at these were March and April, and they were being submitted less than 2 days from the due date. And there was only one that was 2 days before the due date. So 3 out of the 4, just to put it a little bit more into perspective, were both 24 hours or before. And the volume of grants, which again, I'll get into in the fishbone diagram, is a huge issue too, because it ebbs and flows, and sometimes multiple grants will come in at once. So, and sometimes the due dates are within a couple of weeks of each other. So it's very stressful, can be very stressful.
I can read in this chart that when I see that line running along one day out, that line is just pure stress for you. I'm also remembering that to get this data, you were digging into the emails to actually see the dates you got things back from folks.
Yes.
You got creative.
Yeah. Looking back in my emails, and that's the best way to map it out. There's a multitude of different communication styles that I work with my grant team, but email is probably the most frequent that I could actually track down to almost the hours. I could have done, we did days in this project, but I could go 36 hours before, 12 hours before. It definitely revealed a lot of scary information. Gives me anxiety thinking about it right now. So the 3 biggest issues within my fishbone diagram is the volume of grants, my grant team not making it a priority, and other tasks are taking precedence, is why it was not met, 1 week or more ahead. And I'd like to get more than a week ahead, but we're focusing on getting from 1 day to 1 week out in this current process. And that's why I continue to say that this is a work in progress, and we would like to get even more structured, which is why this project has helped me tremendously. And not a priority, and other tasks definitely work kind of in tandem with each other, because I don't want to see that the team was like looking at it and being like, oh, I'm going to do something else. It's just, we have a lot going on in this organization, and we're growing bigger and bigger every day. And a lot of people that are on my grant team are the leaders in this organization. So, it's not that they're, being lazy or anything. It's just that there's so many other things that are going on that sometimes it falls to the wayside, which is why I have to figure out and get creative on how we can complete these grants on time.
Did you get the sense, were they aware of the anxiety and what happened to you when you only had 24 hours? Was that a revelation to anybody?
Not at first, because I would, a lot of the time before I figured out a variety of different communication styles to work with the team, they only saw it over email. And so your email voice is very different than seeing the look on my face when I walk into Barbara Cosma's office and I'm like, oh my goodness, we need to complete this ASAP. So I think once they saw the look on my face and the look of angst, they were like, okay, we need to get this
done. Saw the impact on you.
Yes. The 3 things that cause hypothesis is, again, the grants not making them a priority, and then they were being submitted within 24 hours of being due. So that's in my run chart. Other tasks taking precedence, again, that will be in my run chart and fishbone diagram, and the volume of grants. And so measuring the cycle time helped me understand why information came in so late. It just mapped it out very clearly for me when I kind of knew it, but to put a little couple of charts and some visual aids for me, it really helped me in the beginning stages of this project. So this is in my solution selection matrix. I've touched a little bit upon it, but learning people's how important it is to implement people's different communication styles. And so what I started to do once I looked at the first 4 grants in that February, March timeframe, I started setting up weekly calendar reminders. There was a mandatory monthly meeting. Even if we didn't have any grants that month, we could backtrack. We could look at the grants communication calendar that I've now created. It's just good to meet with everybody and make sure we're all on the same page and making sure that they are making it a priority. I also followed up with people as the due date approached in person. Sometimes it's a little bit more powerful, like I said, to show up in person than over email, so that they know that we really need to make this a serious priority. The most important, I think, of all of it is adapting the communication styles of each colleague. Like my colleague Sonia prefers text messaging. So if I shoot her a text and a reminder about something, she'll get it done. I know she will within a day or so. If I'm I really need this done. Barbara Cosma, like I'd mentioned before, you got to go to her in person and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I need to get completed. How can you help me? And then in the beginning stages of the process, we do a mandatory brainstorming session before each grant with the grant team to go over grant guidelines, what to write about, what we're going to decide on, make sure we're all on the same page, listen to everybody's opinions. And brainstorming session is one of the most important parts of all of this, the whole communication and grant process, because we choose the topic together, we meet together, and it makes us just a stronger team because we all know we're on the same page right from the beginning. The communication tactics are huge, and it's one of the biggest things I learned in this project.
Yeah, you learned a lot on that one.
Yes. I love this chart because this is my run chart post, and it's improvements of days, again, prior to due date that grants are submitted. And so resolving those issues from my root cause analysis made the biggest improvement. So the volume, the other tasks are, and not making it a priority. And so when I looked at several other grants, it went from 1 day, 2 days to 5 days, 7 days. One of our grants, I think it was the Cape Cod Healthcare grant, was, I had time to edit and submit 9 days ahead of time, which was huge. You can see a little bit of a dip, a day or two in the last grant, but like I said, it's a work in progress. And just to see the improvement from March to now December is amazing. It's life-changing. So especially in my world, communications and fundraising field. So yeah,
makes a huge difference.
Huge.
And you said you won.
Yes, and sorry, I didn't even mention that. And so one of my predictors, I said, if we're passing in things ahead of time, we have plenty of time to proofread and edit and submit, and we're good to go. It resulted in a yes pretty quickly. And it was, usually we hear from these people it takes weeks, sometimes months to hear back. We heard back a couple weeks later, and they were like, this is great, you have the money. So that was a huge win for us. And that moment, that was back in, I believe, the beginning of September, kind of solidified for me, okay, then it really does work. This, if you instill all these processes and you record your data and you're very communicative with your team and you get things done ahead of time with being able to edit and proofread and whatnot, that it does result in yes and essentially dollars for the organization. So huge. Okay, so this is in my innovation transfer opportunities. The more reminders, the biggest takeaways, the more reminders I send to the grant team, the faster I get information needed back. And so the 3 different ways that I did this, we touched a little bit upon this in the beginning, but just to paraphrase, biweekly calendar reminders for various grants. So biweekly meaning okay, if there's 2 grants, they're usually getting at least, a couple of reminders each week on there. And anyone's not familiar with Outlook, you get it popped up on your computer in your face. If you have the app on your phone, it's on your phone. So it's not it's just a calendar reminder that shows up in your email. It's very popping up in your face. The monthly mandatory meetings, again, are huge. It's us meeting up, knowing what what we did in the past, what's coming up in the future. And so we can get prepared. If there's 5 grants coming in the month of January, we can meet at the end of December and say, okay, this is how we're going to divide and conquer. This is what's going to go on for 2018. So, and then the monthly communication with the grant holders. Oh yeah, that's huge. Going on the other side of things, one example of that would be Tower. They have 3 grant cycles in January, May, and September, and they like to hold monthly communication meetings between the program officer with the person that manages the grant process. And that's huge too, because say we were going to get a no from Tower, they'll tell you what you need to do to improve. So yeah, the more reminders I send to the grant team, the faster. And then more things that aren't on here are the text messaging, the in-person reminders. We have a weekly senior staff meeting. If I know something's coming up in a couple of weeks, I like to mention that. We all have time to do that weekly. So that's another thing that I actually didn't mention, and it's huge because we're like, okay, Cape Cod Healthcare is coming up in 2 weeks. We really need to have it done by next Friday, no later than next Friday. Ideally, it'd be next Wednesday. And sometimes I'll even maybe a little white lie and tell people that it's due the Wednesday so that I'll have it a couple days ahead of time. Sometimes it helps if you give people a deadline.
Amanda, once they see this webinar, they're going to know about your little white lies.
Exactly.
Well, that's great because it was internal communication and then it was with the grant.
Absolutely. And we just started implementing that seriously since we started Six Sigma, is going it's not just our communications team. And that's what I mainly focused on in this project, but it's who are the external grant holders? What do they want? What are we doing wrong? What can we do to improve? And if you reach out to them, even if they don't hold the monthly communication meetings, like someone like Tower or Lowe's does it, Cape Cod Healthcare does it, you can reach out to them, and most of the time they're really open and willing to speak with you.
And you can improve your process listening to them.
Totally. So I will just highlight 5 of the biggest lessons learned that I learned in this whole project is the importance of frequent communication with the grant team. The importance of the grant calendar. We have a shared Google Doc and Excel spreadsheet calendar because some people use Google Docs, some people use Excel. So we like to work on these 2 main spreadsheets. And the data is on what was done the year before, and it's a working document. So if we know that there's other grants coming up, I'm the only editor of both because people let me know. I think if you have too many cooks in the kitchen, the calendar can get a little messed up. So I'm the one who manages those calendars. The importance of brainstorming. So a lot of the time when bigger grants like Tower, they'll put out 4 or 5 categories. It's good to have those brainstorming sessions where you pick the category and then you pick the program within that category that you're going to apply for from your nonprofit. The importance of learning each individual's preferred communication styles for sure, because people are going to work better if you're working within what they want to do. So it wasn't like it was all their fault that everything was being done 24 hours before. Sometimes it was just sending emails in the beginning, and it's you got to do more than that. So that was huge. And then the importance of working ahead of time on each grant. The more time you have with your final draft, the better, in my opinion, because it's another fresh pair of eyes to look at things, to proofread, for simple things like grammatical errors, or as big as maybe parts of the budget are missing, and we can go back and fix those so that we have everything 100% completed. Because if anyone's not familiar with the grant process, if you submit a grant with a missing piece, sometimes they'll come back to you and let you know, but most of the time they just throw your grant away. So you could spend weeks on something, and then if you're scrambling 24 hours before and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot my cover sheet, they might just be like, you know what, we're not even going to bother with it. So
and it's a total waste.
It's a total waste. So you have to be super meticulous with how you submit your grants. And I'm the one who submits it. I'm the one who presses the final submit. So I want to make sure I have everything incorporated before. And then my 4 biggest project benefits is working ahead of time will give more time to review and perfect the grant before submission. So I touched a little bit upon that already. Completing grants ahead of time will essentially result in more yeses. The Cape Cod Healthcare was the example from earlier. That was the yes. So it's huge, obviously, probably the most important. Learning communication styles at each member of the grant team results in working better together and makes us stronger as a whole. Because like I said, if I would not be able to complete this without our whole team working together, and there's so many, every person is important in this whole process. So we're constantly communicating and letting each other know what's going on, then we're just going to be stronger and we're going to submit better grants. And the more yeses our nonprofit receives, the stronger our programming and organization will be as a whole. So like I said, a lot of our revenue comes from grants. So if we don't get grants, we can't fund our programs, and it could be really bad if we didn't get our yeses. So the more yeses, the better to grow and expand all of our programming so that we can continue to be a flourishing and thriving nonprofit like we have been for the last 45 years. So
That's great. Thank you, Amanda.
You're welcome.
So just a couple of questions for you. How has doing this project impacted the way you look at things in general?
Oh, it's incredible. Not even just, in the grant process. I find it in my personal life when I go to organize my closet for each season. I'm like, all right, what's the leanest way? Do I really need this sweater that my aunt gave to me 4 years ago? Like, let's get rid of stuff. Let's purge, let's clean, let's organize. And it's funny, around our office, it's we talk about Six Sigma all the time. We're like, all right, what's the lean way to do this? So I feel like it's made a huge impact, honestly, in both my professional and my personal life, because I look at things from a different angle, and I look at what is the most efficient way we can do things. So
didn't you have an event where it was people lining up at tables and they decided it wasn't being done efficiently, and so they rearranged how it was being done? I think, was it meals for people?
Oh, yes. So we just had back in November a huge distribution, our turkey distribution.
Yes.
Okay, so we had about 60 volunteers come to the Stop and Shop down on the Cape, and we distributed 400 bags to 400 of our neediest families and gave them non-perishable goods and gift cards. And the way that so I went there about an hour or two earlier with a few other volunteers to get everything set up so that it was a nice assembly line and everything would go smoothly. And Jennifer and I were looking at things, and we were like, oh no, just the way that there wasn't enough room for people to go around in a circle and grab one thing after the other. There wouldn't be enough room for people to hand things to other people to put it in the bag. And so the way that we set it up, space things up, set them up by food in their particular areas, knew which volunteer was going to be where, it went so smoothly. Like, it helped tremendously with the way that things were set up, and we were like, what's the leanest way we could do things?
I think I heard Jennifer say something like that, like, this is not Lean Six Sigma. We got to change this.
We got to change it. And so it was a little crazy at first. And then once we really took a step back, kind of mapped it out, we were literally drawing it on a piece of paper next to the food and figuring out, like, what is the best way to get this done and make sure that people are in and out. We have such a variety of volunteers, from kids from the high school to, older individuals to, there's just so many different people. We're like, what's the most efficient way? And we don't want people to be here for 6 hours when they can be here for 3.
No.
So
you did a real workspace layout redesign.
Yes.
But it was for people to get food and for families to get what they needed.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Such a great story. This is really lovely, Amanda. This is just great to hear. I am Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to a GoingSixSigma.com success story highlighting Amanda Booth and her work with the grant process. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And for sharing your success story with us. I also want to thank our listeners for joining us today. I hope you found this success story helpful and as inspirational as I found it. If you have a success story and you'd like to share, please send us a note at contact@GoingSixSigma.com. Don't forget to go to our website and view all of our other success stories. We've got a series of government projects, and now we have a series of nonprofit projects. So we're really got some great stories to listen to, and you can download any of the free tools, templates, blogs, webinars, podcasts, all for free on our website. Until next time, thank you all for joining us.